Welcome to the channel, Dr. J.W. Morrison, theologist, Central Coast, New South Wales, Australia. More on Unrwa.
During 2020, Palestinian children, like many others around the world, couldn't go to school due to COVID-19. During that time, United Nations Relief Works Agency, or UNRWA, produced and provided the students material that went way beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic.
We found that it contains various violations of UN values, of UNESCO standards, and of UNRWA's own principles. These were educational materials which were distributed to over 320,000 Palestinian children across the West Bank and Gaza.
Marcus Sheff leads a group that monitors peace and cultural tolerance in schools. It examined the material sent to those children, and what they found was not good.
The idea that UNRWA, a UN organization, is distributing material which calls on students to defend the motherland with blood, or that glorifies terrorists and directs students to terrorists like Dalal Mughrabi, who is in their materials a role model for young girls, somebody who murdered 38 people, including 13 children on a civilian bus.
This impact group report from January lays out examples found throughout the curriculum. In mathematics, students are asked to write the number of martyrs in the First Intifada. A language studies question asks students to find the preposition in a sentence like, "Jihad is one of the doors to paradise." And in social studies, where Zionist politics...
Jihad is when you wipe out all other civilizations so that Muslim Islamists are the only ones that are left.
Policy is blamed for exhausting Palestinian natural resources.
It was written by UNRWA's teachers. Now, UNRWA's teachers are suppressed and tolerance.
Following the January impact report, UNRWA admitted to the problem and assured governments it had been addressed. A follow-up study by the impact team, however, shows that was not the case.
That means UNRWA is an accomplice to terrorism.
Within these materials, we also found hateful material which young people anywhere should not be studying, and certainly not being taught by a UN organization. So
UNRWA is now a terrorist organization. That's all there is to it. They can put icing on top, they can try and cover it up. It's being run by the terrorists.
I think what we see here is that, UNRWA is absolutely part of the problem in relation to the incitement of young people in the region.
In one social studies exercise, sixth graders are shown a map of the British Mandate called Palestine that does not include any Israel reference, and told Palestine is the geographical area which extends from the Mediterranean Sea in the west to the River Jordan in the east, and from Lebanon and Syria in the north to the Gulf of Aqaba and Egypt in the south. Its location gave it strategic importance, making it coveted by invaders and colonial powers.
And that's not true, is it? That's just indoctrinating these people, these infants, these children, to think that they own more than what they do.
And there's another problem.
And that is, if you have distributed print materials to 320,000 children, then you found that you had been distributing hateful material. How exactly did UNRWA get those materials back? We have no answer to that.
Well, they didn't. They haven't. And taxpayers from Australia are contributing to that? No.
Former President Trump cut funding to UNRWA because of this kind of incitement in Palestinian schools. President Biden has pledged to resume humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. Sheff maintains the world should expect transparency from any United Nations body. And until UNRWA can prove otherwise, it should be understood the organization teaches hate. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And it absolutely does. It's 100% true. Continuing with UNRWA, now Hiel Nuer testifies before U.S. Congress on UNRWA.
Chairman, ranking members, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. For years, we've been told by Unrwa and its supporters that the agency performs life-saving work and that its teachers offer Palestinian students an education that promotes human rights, tolerance, equality, and non-discrimination. Today, more than ever before, and I mean literally today, in light of the bombshell news reports in yesterday's Wall Street Journal, Reuters, and elsewhere, we now know this has been a lie. From these and other revelations of the past few days, we know that in Gaza,
It's 100% a lie. UNRWA's been supplying covert terrorism educational documents, if you want to call it, educational books to these children and turning them into terrorists.
at least 12 Unrwa employees personally participated in the massacre of October 7th, which involved the murder of 1,200 Israelis, along with mass rape, torture, and mutilation. Secretary of State Blinken said yesterday, these intelligence reports are highly, highly credible. The world also learned yesterday that 1,200 Unrwa employees in Gaza are part of Hamas or Islamic Jihad.
1,200 of these grubs work for UNRWA.
Meaning actual operatives within the political and military organizations. Finally, an estimated 6,000 UNRWA employees, being half of the workforce in Gaza, have close family members in these terrorist organizations.
I mean, the deeper you go, the worse it gets.
Now, UNRWA's top donors, the United States, Germany, Britain, Canada, and many others, have just announced they're freezing funds. Now, accordingly, I've come here from Geneva to bring before the Congress our case against UNRWA. I've come here to ask the Congress of the United States, which is the largest donor to UNRWA at over $300 million a year, to not just suspend, but to end the funding for good, and to take the lead in dissolving an organization that is riddled with incitement to hate, involvement in terrorism, and the perpetuation of war. Members of the
Can it be said any clearer than that?
committee will find all of the evidence that I present here on our website at unwatch.org under the case against UNRWA. Now, on Friday, Secretary General Guterres announced that he was, quote, horrified to learn that members of his UNRWA staff were implicated in terrorism. Members of the committee, I'm here to bear witness and testify that Secretary General Guterres, the head of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, their predecessors, their senior colleagues, could not possibly have been shocked that UNRWA employees are implicated in terrorism.
And I agree, there's no way in the world it could be that far gone and you stand there and go, oh no, I'm sorry, these people, we didn't know these people were involved in terrorism. They're giving out education, hate propaganda to the children through their education systems. The humanitarian aid's being sent down into the tunnels. It's being cut off by Hamas in Palestine. These people are in it for the money, viewers. That's all they're in it for. And you've got to contact your government, like I have, and ask them to boycott and completely forget about UNRWA.
Because for the past 9 years, and Chairman Smith knows this very well because he's been on this issue and he's invited me to testify, we've been uncovering, publishing, and submitting to the UN, to UNRWA, evidence of widespread and systematic incitement to jihadi terrorism, the praise of Nazi leader Adolf Hitler, calls to slaughter Jews on the part of UNRWA teachers, school principals, and other employees. These reports range from 10 to 200 pages. For example, just in November, we sent a report on 20 teachers who celebrated the October 7th massacre.
Viewers, there you go. They're in it up to their neck.
In March, together with Impact SC, we identified 133 UNRWA teachers and staff who promoted hate and violence on social media. In June 2022, we released a report called UNRWA's Teachers of Hate. It included the following Facebook post by Elham Mansour, quote, an UNRWA teacher, quote, by Allah, anyone who can kill and slaughter any Zionist and Israeli criminal and doesn't do so doesn't deserve to live. Kill them and pursue them everywhere. They are the greatest enemy. All Israel deserves is death. This is an UNRWA teacher statement on Facebook. We sent it to the UN. They did nothing. We sent them reports.
And they won't do nothing because there's too much money involved.
in 2021, 2019, 2017, 2015 numerous reports. They never contacted us for information. They refused our repeated written requests to meet to discuss the problem. They cannot say they didn't know. Mr. Guterres knew. The head of the Unrwa knew. The United Nations knew. They simply chose not to act. But it's much worse than that. From the beginning, their response to our reports was to attack us for doing the work they failed to do.
And that's what people will do when they're in things for profit. They'll turn around and they'll blame shift. And they'll start to try and incriminate you. They've done that with the Olympics, or the trans and queers and things that totally disrespected the Lord's Supper. Now anybody that goes against it that they can find, they're suing. That's how bent this is.
If we look at Christopher Gunnis, the longtime Unrwa spokesman, he's now come back as a surrogate, giving interviews on Al Jazeera. He said on Twitter the following in response to our reports, quote, "Appeal to journalists. Please don't turn UN Watch baseless allegations about anti-Semitism into a he said, she said story. It's a non-story. Quote, UN Watch makes a fool of itself again. Credibility dead in the water. Will anyone believe them again? Quote, he's interested to find out more about UN Watch's political and financial affiliations since its establishment. Can anyone advise?" This was their response to smear the messenger. They are not interested in finding out the root problem of incitement to terrorism. In June 2022,
this guy's very good. He's onto it, and these are the people that they want to stop. You'll see on social media, like this one, YouTube and others, if they don't like the narrative, whether it's truth or not, harmful or not, they just cut it down. They just take it down. My channel, Probe Ricky, has been shadow banned since it started. I get people sending me emails saying I can't like or comment on your certain videos and this and that. I get trouble from YouTube all the time. Oh, we're taking this down, we're taking that down, and there's thousands of other people with the same content. That's what these people do. If the narrative don't suit, they'll take you out.
when they had to suspend 6 out of 10 of their employees under pressure from the US, Unrwa Deputy Commissioner General Lenny Stensteth, who's now the Director General of the Norwegian Foreign Ministry, she informed donor states and put it on her website that, quote, the real intent of UN Watch, my organization, is, quote, to destroy and not build, and to invite conflict, not build a lasting peace. Now, the US and other donors have asked Unrwa to investigate and to ensure accountability. I can tell you for a decade, Unrwa has shown itself to be unwilling, unable, and unfit. Today, I wish to present our new report.
Unable, and unfit.
Called Unrwa's Terrorgram, which I've handed to each of the members, and it's on our website, unwatch.org. In this report, we document a Telegram chat group of over 3,000 Unrwa teachers in Gaza that is replete with messages, photos, and videos cheering and celebrating the massacre of October 7th. It includes, for example, Safa Mohammed al-Najjar on the morning of October 7th. She's an Unrwa teacher of computers in Gaza, an administrator of this Telegram group. She celebrated the massacre, posting videos. She praised the Hamas Mujahideen, the holy warriors, as they massacred, mutilated, and raped Israelis. Unrwa English teacher Abdallah Mejez shared a message from Hamas urging Gazans to stay put, to ignore Israeli messages, asking them to evacuate for their safety.
Because they use them as human shields.
Effectively doing the work of Hamas to ask Gazans to be human shields. This is an Unrwa teacher. Abdul Karim Mejer, in our report, an elementary school teacher, celebrated the Hamas terrorists, saying, quote, may Allah keep their feet steady and guide their aim. When a group member wondered what these heroes, the terrorists, as they're perpetrating the massacre, what they were brought up on, Mejer replied, they imbibed jihad and resistance with their mother's milk. And a few days later, this Unrwa teacher asked he asked Hamas to execute their Israeli hostages. When Stefan Dujarric, the UN spokesman, was asked about our information, he replied on January 11th, quote, I mean, UN Watch, they have a track record, and I think from our end it speaks for itself. He tried to disparage us. Just to conclude, we have massive incitement to terrorism. Prominent people have said bad apples. It's a few bad apples. We're talking about 1,200 who belong to the organization, 3,000 in this group, 6,000 whose family members belong to it. This is not a problem of bad apples, it's rotten to the core. We've talked about incitement, we've talked about acts of actual violence, and finally, let's get to the core problem. And with that, I conclude. The core problem of Unrwa, the very purpose of the agency, is to perpetuate the war of 1948, to send the message to Palestinians that the war of 1948 is not over. Don't use cement to build homes, hospitals, and schools here in Gaza. Use it to build hundreds of miles of terror tunnels, to tunnel into Israel, to invade Israel, to go back to what your homes are. That is the message of Unrwa. We should not be surprised what happened on October 7th, because that is the message that these Palestinians got for more than 70 years in Unrwa schools. Unrwa is a failure. We have to recognize what the Swiss Foreign Minister Ignazio Cassis said. This is a country historically that supports the UN. He said the following, I quote, "Unrwa has become part of the problem. It supplies the ammunition to continue the conflict. By supporting Unrwa, we keep the conflict alive. It's a perverse logic." And I'm here to say, if the United States and other governments that fund Unrwa truly care about helping Palestinians and Israelis, it's time to put an end to this perverse logic. We're asking the Congress to take the lead in dissolving this agency. Thank you very much.
Well, you make up your own mind. I think that's pretty straightforward, don't you? And I'll close with this footage of a Green senator in Australia, my country, who demands Australian taxpayers' money be sent to Unrwa. And I thank God for Penny Wong, who has not listened to this woman in terms of being manipulated. But this is not an Australian senator. This is a extreme, fanatical, pro-Palestine representative that's infiltrated the Australian Senate.
The coalition is morally bankrupt when it comes to Palestine, and Labour has shown itself to be heartless, gutless cowards. You are watching the massacre of thousands of Palestinians by Israel.
No, we're watching the consequences of Hamas, the government of Hamas, over the Palestinian people who have terrorized Israel for years and years, and October 7th was the icing on the cake. And we just saw that Hamas uses these Palestinians for human shields. This woman, honestly, the way she's speaking, the accusing, the false accusations, the lies, she's not doing this in the spirit of Australia. She's doing it in some other spirit. But I can assure you, viewers, it's not the Australian spirit. It's definitely not. It's some other Middle Eastern, Pakistani, deluded form of politics. It's not Australian politics. Even one of her own peoples looks puzzled.
And you are not condemning Israel. You refuse to call for an immediate ceasefire. Well, we are not going to sit here and watch you pat yourselves on the back for doing nothing. Weasel words are not going to stop war crimes. Today, we bring the people's protest into Parliament. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Into Parliament. Free, free Palestine! Today, we bring the people's protest into Parliament. Free.
Did you just hear that? They're words of rebellion. Today, we bring the people's protest. What people? What people is this woman talking about? They're not the Australian people, I can assure you. They're the Muslim people, the Islamists.
Free Palestine! Bring the people's protest into Parliament. Free, free Palestine!
Thank you, Senator.
What an absolute joke. And that person has infiltrated the Australian Parliament. Oh my God. This is Dr. J.W. Morrison, theologist, Australian taxpayer, trying to protect where my money goes. Bye for now.